Would you describe the current state of play when it comes to Iran? A ceasefire, at least in name, but an ongoing U.S. naval blockade. Is the U.S. still being actively at war?
I think we are still actively at war, and a war that we have no known end state. The president has not explained to the American people or even to the members of Congress, which he's supposed to do, as to exactly what his end state is, because it seems to change from day to day and sometimes from sentence to sentence when he is giving interviews. First, he wanted regime change. Well, he got regime change, but it was for the worse, right? We've got a worse Ayatollah than was there before. Then he says he wants to open the Straits of Hormuz, but the Straits of Hormuz were open before he attacked, and now it's mined, and now Iran is charging $1 million per ship that's traveling through it. So I would say we are still at war, and this is Trump's war of choice, and it's at the expense of the American people.
Well, we're knocking around 60 days, maybe 90 days, Senator, when it comes to a war powers inflection point. I know there have been a series of votes, and you've been front and center in the congressional effort to pass a war powers resolution. When you talk to your Republican colleagues, if we do in fact get through that next 30 days, and we're talking about this 90 days into a wartime operation in the Middle East, do you think there will be growing appetite for an authorization for the use of military force, and how important is that to you?
Well, it's critically important. And by the way, the way the law works is the president has up to a maximum of 60 days to come to Congress after launching armed conflict to explain and justify why that happened. So 60 days is the longest amount of time he has to come and explain to us. The war powers resolution that Democrats have been filing every week, and we're going to do it every single week. Mine went through last week, and then, of course, Tammy Baldwin. We're going to bring that up every week to give my Republican colleagues a chance to vote to have Trump stop hostilities, come to Congress, explain and justify this war of choice of his, and then we will debate and vote whether or not we will give authorization for the use of military force. That said, I do think the 60-day mark is really important because I've heard from some of my Republican colleagues that, where I'm not going to be able to I can't vote to authorize more funding for this war beyond the 60-day mark without Trump coming to us. So there's growing anxiousness among some of my Republican colleagues, and I think we may actually be able to pass this war power resolution where we actually force the president to come before Congress.
Well, as we consider what may come before Congress and the Senate specifically, Senator, now that we have seen the ousting of Navy Secretary Phelan and we've seen an acting secretary appointed in Hung Kao, do you have concerns about him as a candidate? Is that someone that you are comfortable with serving in this role, or does there need to be a thorough vetting of someone else? And how is it complicated by the ongoing operations and naval blockade we are engaged in the Middle East?
Well, what I'm most concerned about is incompetent leadership both at the White House with the commander-in-chief and incompetent leadership with Secretary Hegseth. When you see such a rapid turnover of the top military officials constantly getting fired, and now, Mr. Phelan was Trump's Mar-a-Lago buddy. This is a guy that raised millions of dollars for him, and I didn't think he was competent to serve as Secretary of the Navy to begin with. He has no naval experience. But obviously, at some point, he actually stood up and opposed with this war of choice, and now he's out. And from everything that I'm hearing, this was a surprise firing for him. He did not expect it to happen. What I'm most concerned about is the disorganization within the DOD, the incompetence of the Secretary of Defense. And yes, anybody that is brought in to serve in that role needs to come before Congress. That's my job. It's my job to represent the American people and the voice of the people of Illinois and the people of the United States to interview and determine whether or not someone is qualified to be Secretary of the Navy. And it's all absolutely complicated by the fact that we are still engaged in active hostilities with Iran.